Let's start again. Here we go. My name's Steve Gutberg. This is Ken McAuliffe, and I am in his Greenwich Village pad. It's very cool. I mean, oh my God, he's got so many records.
Swag, man.
Because he is
Swag.
The jazz vinyl lover.
I'm the jazz vinyl hoarder.
Well, there's a lot of stuff there.
There's a lot of shit over there.
A lot of shit over there. But anyway,
and there's some shit right there. But anyway,
and SCHIT shit. We didn't say bad words here.
Nah.
So, what is your problem with music? What is it?
Their pricing
what is it?
situation.
Say it though.
They're shysters and con artists.
But other than that, they're nice people.
They're wonderful people, except the fact that they're shysters and con artists.
And
I don't like the sound of their pressing. Their pressings are very soft.
Did we say what they are?
Music Matters?
Music Matters, okay. Music Matters you don't like.
I don't like because they sound pretty and soft, and the bass is rolled off, and the top end is rolled off, and they're really, really pretty and soft. They're kind of like the audio equivalent of not a German Shepherd, but an Irish Retriever, a Springer Spaniel. That's what those records
they're eager.
are. They're so eager to please you. Please love our records. As if you listen to the original pressing, or even like a New York pressing, you got dynamics, you got force, you got power. That stuff is kicking butt, you know. People say, oh, well, Rudy mastered to have, the mid-range is compressed. I want to hear the original document. I want to hear the real thing the musicians heard that Rudy heard. B, they're shysters and con artists because they raise their prices as their stock drops. And then they have the SRX Super Vinyl, $65 a pop. Okay, that's why I don't like Music Matters.
All right. Well, tell me how you really feel. We'll do that in another video. So, and you said Rudy Van Gelder. Now, I think the thing about Rudy's records, I get why people like them, but I also get why people don't like them. I think the piano sound is sometimes pretty iffy. And you were talking before we started about Elvin Jones.
Elvin Jones?
Yeah, his cymbals were a little hot.
Often the cymbals can be way too hot. They're going whoosh, whoosh. I forget, they're phasing because I imagine the volume wasn't high enough on the board. Yeah. And what's up with Rudy? You recorded Elvin a million times. What the heck is up with the drum sound?
Yeah, what's up with that?
But Philly Joe Jones' drums always sound great. Art Taylor's drums always sound great. Jimmy Cobb, Billy Higgins' records always, drumming on the Blue Note records always sounds great. But for certain things, you don't like the piano. I don't like when he records Elvin. He had a problem.
Yeah.
Besides that, a master.
I mean, he's the man.
He's the man.
Who can argue, really?
Only Roy Dunan could argue with Rudy Van Gelder.
Well,
East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah. But the thing about Rudy, I think he was so secretive. I can just guess, right? But he just had a formula of how he didn't listen. He said, here's the setup for the drums, here's the setup for the piano. I feel that way.
Maybe he wasn't listening. Or he would have heard that Elvin's drums are spazzing out through the monitors.
One can conclude that he wasn't paying attention to that part, right? Or the piano.
Interesting.
Maybe he had the fader set and said, okay, guys, ready to go.
Maybe he had like a notebook. Here's the Coltrane setup. Here's the Gene Ammons setup. Here's the Horace Silver setup, and he just moves the faders around and orders some tacos. Yeah,
but I do think it's amazing, because I didn't realize it till we went to Hackensack? Is that where we were?
We went to Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey.
Cliffs, and we were in the studio, the second
cathedral.
Studio. The cathedral.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was gorgeous, amazing.
Right.
So many incredible records there for that Coltrane. What was that called? Both Directions at Once?
Both Directions at Once, right.
Right. So Ken and I were there for the press event, and that was the first time I'd ever been there. And then over in the corner was his record cutting lathe.
Yes.
So he didn't just record the records in the pre-digital age. He cut the vinyl right there.
Right.
Possibly the same day as the actual session.
There's
not too many recording engineers / mastering engineers that do. In other words, what you heard on those, especially the original pressings that you love so much, you heard what he wanted it to sound like. It wasn't another mastering engineer saying, well, here's what I think it should sound like. You heard what he wanted it to sound like, for better or worse.
It's like a DeLorean. It's a custom car, just for you.
I mean, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And when we were there, the lathe was sitting over on the opposite end of the control room, which...
Right. Well, he hadn't used it in a long time.
Right. But that was obviously in the day, it was back in the control room.
Possibly.
And I did a piece on Jed Levy for Stereophile and other musicians as audiophiles. And he said that when they could hang out in the studio for some degree in the control room while they were just getting ready or after the recording, each individual recording, but when it was time to cut to lacquer, he threw everybody out of the control booth, which I thought was interesting. That's when he saw the Polk brand on one of the speakers, but otherwise Rudy had taken off all the the identifying names off all the gear.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how psycho is that? How hard was that?
He didn't want anybody to learn how he did it.
Particularly back then, he had to have like a screwdriver and pry those things off.
Only he put tape over himself. I've seen that in studios. I was at the Daptone studio in Brooklyn, and it was really funny because they're an analog studio,
Right.
So I say to the engineer, so what about compression? Like a compressor you use during a session. And he said, oh, we don't really use compressor. He said, except we do have in the rack over there a digital compressor that he says it has. I remember him saying it has a piece of paper over it so you can't see what it is. He said, but just in case you were over there, snooping around, he said it's just here for testing. We don't really use it for anything. He's very defensive about it. But the funniest thing he said about compression was, he said we record analog. He said, I just hit the tape really hard and then the tape saturates, which is another way of doing, let's say, quotes, analog compression.
Right.
So and you got to admit, I mean, Daptone isn't trying to make audiophile recordings. They're pretty grungy.
Yeah.
But they are in the essence of being pure in that they don't screw with it. I mean, what went down in the session is what they got.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. So many studios have closed in the city. Even right here in this neighborhood, where Bowie recorded Dark Star is just right past Broadway.
Have you been in that studio?
I never knew it was a studio.
Oh, wow.
But one day I remember, it's on Crosby Street. It's right across from what used to be the Crosby Sandwich Shop, which was just like a hole in the wall. But I remember once I was below Houston on Crosby. Well, actually, Bowie lived 2 blocks down from the studio. He was literally 2 blocks from that studio, which was the Magic Shop, I believe it was called.
Okay.
And I saw him once in that neighborhood, and I realized he was probably going to the studio.
Yeah.
And there was another amazing studio right on Broadway, Systems 2, we talked about earlier, where a lot of jazz guys recorded, I believe, closed. You still have Sear Sound. What used to be Avatar, I think, is now taken over by Gibson. It's kind of a school or a place to show their guitars. Is it Gibson or Fender? Didn't one of them just go down?
I think it's Gibson.
Yeah, so I guess that's not there anymore. But it's amazing all the history of studios that have passed in the city. There used to be so many of them.
Oh yeah.
And now there's like nothing. I don't know.
I think there's smaller ones. What's the one that used to be called Dangerous Music?
I don't know.
I was there not long ago. What is it called now? But anyway, it's a really cool space. I knew that when I was there 6 months ago that David Crosby was there making a record.
Oh, wow.
It's in the East Village. It's a really cool space. I keep meaning to go back there.
In the East Village. Oh, maybe I've been there. Huh.
But when it was called Dangerous Music, I can't remember the guy who owned it. His name was David. He said that the Stones used to use it as a rehearsal space.
Wow.
They didn't record there, but they just rehearsed there and did stuff there.
Wow.
But they recorded their rehearsals. And he told me this funny thing. He said that when Keith was listening to playback, he wanted to listen to the playbacks in mono. And he said, and Mick wanted to hear them in stereo. And I thought that was hilarious because it just says something. I mean, if you listen to Stones records like Some Girls, some tracks are practically mono and some tracks are stereo. And I guess I said, well, now you know. Some are mixed by Mick, and some are, at least Mick had a hand in it or something. So anyway, we're getting off the track here. So my question for you, where are we starting? there's things going on above us.
It's weird, like birds.
Yeah, there's birds in this place. Well, we're on the top floor. Maybe they flew in.
Birds don't fly this high around here.
No, okay. Yeah, they're New York birds.
They stay close to the street where all the falafel is.
Yeah, that's true. Got a point. So anyway, I was saying before we started to prepare, Ken, so jazz is your thing. It's your main music thing. You write about it. You were a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
But I was saying, so do musicians care about their sound at a session? Are they saying to the engineer, I prefer if you use this mic on my sax or something?
And you were saying how Ron Carter is the greatest example.
Ron
who's
Carter's
so picky, you're going to use my mic. But
his pickup, his amp. No, my way or the highway was Ron.
But I guess my feeling was, if we look at Rudy or Roy Dunan, like you said, they had a formula. I don't think the musicians did have that much say.
No, probably not.
And now there's so little money to record jazz, as Kenny Washington, the drummer, calls them cash and carry sessions. You walk in, particularly if you're a sideman, for Criss Cross or Fresh Sound or some of these smaller labels, even Sunnyside. The quality of those recordings varies so widely. I've had Criss Cross records on my system that sound good, CDs, and some that sound horrible. I think unless he's a name like a Joe Lovano, I think he has very little say-so. I think if he's more of an unknown musician or a sideman, he has, it's all about, geez, we're giving you a record deal.
Right,
We're going to say how the
right,
record sounds.
Of course. But I'm saying for the leader.
Well, like a Joe Lovano, I mean, you wonder, Joe Lovano, Dave Douglas, how much do they care? I mean, one of the questions I always ask in my musicians' audiophiles pieces is, since you're an audiophile, when we've done Billy Drummond, you talked about it,
Right.
Chris Lightcap, John Abair, does being an audiophile change the way you hear music or listen to music? But I never took it farther out to how does it influence your sound. Even though I think, obviously, Billy Drummond, who has such a beautiful sound, it affects him. John Abair has a great sound. Chris Lightcap is way into audio. But I really think it's different with every record, every label, every musician.
Yeah, that's fair. I remember this, do you know this bass player, David Fink?
I know the name.
Yeah, anyway, he used to play on a lot of Chesky sessions.
Huh.
And he always wanted to use a pickup. And I remember having this, in quotes, argument with him. I said, you got this beautiful bass. Why would you want your sound being picked up?
Right.
And he was just like, well, I just want to play. I don't want you to basically be dicking around trying to get a sound. Let's just
sound.
go.
Yeah, right.
So this was always a thing. I'd say, you spent a lot of money to buy this instrument for its sound, but apparently you don't care if its sound winds up on the record.
Spending years getting a good personal sound.
Right.
That horrible Eddie Gomez sound was all pickup mics.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s or whatever. It wasn't Eddie Gomez, it was that horrible mic.
Yeah.
Those are horrible.
Well, there's a lot of that in the 70s and 80s of bad sounding pickups on acoustic basses.
That's one thing Rudy got, was a great upright sound.
Yeah.
And the better stereo, you can hear the high end, you can hear the low end, or the high end and the low end. You can hear everything really, really clearly on a really great system. So, yeah. What else you got, Steve?
Well, I don't know. I did have that one other thing, and I can't remember what it is. But just that you've interviewed a lot of audiophile musicians. Well, not a lot, but there are ones
we've
that are
done a
out
good
there.
handful.
Peter Washington is, right? Did you ever do?
He won't do it.
He won't?
Both of the Washingtons, Kenny and Peter, will not do an interview for Musicians Audiophiles. I don't know why. We've had a lot of great musicians do it, and I think those guys are obviously much more particular about their sound in general, and that must correlate into their recordings. You would hope, if they have control. I haven't listened to the latest Jerome Sabah record.
Oh yeah.
I haven't listened to that one yet, which just came out a while ago.
Oh no, it's good.
But he has one of the best systems I've ever heard.
I think it's his own record, right?
Right, yeah, it's him and Greg Toohey, I think, the guitar player.
But I think he paid for the session and put it out himself,
right?
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So I assume he had some control.
Yeah, there's more guys trying to opt for vinyl, even though most jazz musicians can't afford to pay for vinyl. It's just not cost effective. They don't want to carry this stuff on the road compared to CDs. Even though it seems to be different.
That's weird.
It's weird, but from what I can see from feedback on my little jazz vinyl lovers group, it's more common in Europe. The guys will, cut a certain amount of records and sell them on the gigs, but they're all much closer together. The gigs. I mean, Jed Levy was saying, I just interviewed him. In America, the distances are much greater to cover for jazz guys, and that's the distances they got to pay for. In Europe, the promoters will pay for the travel. So it all figures into the cost.
Yeah, because you think your records can't be ripped off as in like copied or streamed or whatever. So people say, I don't need to buy the CD or whatever because I can just stream it on Tidal or whatever. Right? But a record, you gotta get the physical copy.
I think American jazz musicians are slow to coming to that. Even if you look like a Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny. I mean, very few of his current records are available on vinyl. People will pay hundreds of dollars for the Metheny Charlie Hayden record because it's not available on vinyl here. You got to get it from Japan. Almost none of his records are available on vinyl, and his records sound fucking great. They sound They sound great. I mean, I used to use some of his Imaginary Day and The Way Up CDs because they sound beautiful. They're Technicolor soundtracks, those things. But he doesn't seem to care about vinyl at all, and he could definitely afford it. But then you wonder, like, does Bill Frisell care on Nonesuch? Does Blue Note is slowly coming out with more and more vinyl. All the labels are getting into vinyl reissue series. But like, does Nora Jones care about vinyl? I don't know. Does Diana Krall care about vinyl?
No.
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, But it gets back to that thing that they should care. I think any musician who's any good cares about their sound, right? But not necessarily how their sound is translated to making a recording, which just strikes me as odd. That's all.
In saying that, the last Diana Krall, Tony Bennett record, that's an incredible sounding record.
Oh, really?
That's a Peter Washington. Man, that record sounds amazing.
What label was it on? Columbia?
That's on, no, it's on, I think Krall's on, geez, I should know this, Blue Note or Verve now? I don't know, but it sounded amazing.
Oh.
And they cut it out there with Al Schmidt, I think.
Great.
He did the sessions. They did it in California, Capitol Studios. I think Kareem Riggins on drums, either Kareem or Kenny Washington. I think it was the Bill Charlap trio, so that would be Kenny Washington, Peter Washington on drums and bass. That record sounds fantastic on CD, so.
Huh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, man.
You are the jazz vinyl lover.
I live in Swingville, man. That's where I live, in Swingville.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't do any better than that.
I will link to your site, or your channel, I should say.
Thank you, Steve.
You write for Stereophile and Downbeat and a bunch of... No Downbeat. Yes? No?
Downbeat.
Other places,
Jazz
too.
Times, Modern Drummer.
Yeah.
Used to be Redshift, but they fired me. So, yeah, this has been great.
Okay.
Thanks so much for exposing me to your audience.
Yeah, later.